Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, and I invite you to sit back and eavesdrop on our conversation as we share some wisdom, a little bit of wit, and wonderful experts who help women navigate career and life changes and challenges. And most importantly, I want you to know that you're not alone in whatever you're going through. Each week, we share through these conversations resources to encourage women to be more confident, resilient, and brave in their career and life choices. We stream live weekly every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on the E360 TV network, which you can find on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire. And we go live simultaneously on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, where you can interact with us. And if you prefer to listen while you're on the run to your favorite shows, we're on all the podcast channels as well. So if something inspires you today and you want more, please subscribe to your favorite channel, leave us a comment, and share your favorite episodes so we can create more ripples in the world for women. So today I have a question that might challenge your perspective on leadership. What would it take for you to step into a bolder, more impactful leadership role? Leaders come in all shapes and sizes. Some have a leadership title and some demonstrate personal leadership. We're talking to all of you today because everyone is a leader in some way. I'm thrilled to have Colleen Slaughter join us. She's a distinguished transformational facilitator and executive coach with over 20 years of experience. Colleen has dedicated her career to helping leaders worldwide unlock their full potential and create meaningful impact. Her work spans Fortune 500 companies, NGOs, and nonprofits across 60 countries, bringing a global and deeper perspective on leadership development. Colleen will share her journey, reveal common barriers women face in leadership, and provide practical tips to help you develop a bold leadership style. We'll discuss hot topics in leadership development, the most significant needs for today's leaders, and how to ensure your leadership has meaningful impact. So stay with us to learn how to elevate your leadership and make a lasting difference in your career and beyond. So you won't want to miss this inspiring conversation with Colleen Slaughter. So let's get started. Welcome, Colleen. Thank you so
Thank
much for joining
you.
us.
Thank you so much, Maria. What a warm welcome.
Ah,
Wow.
well, I'm thrilled to have you here, and I know you're coming to us from way across the pond. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we get into your personal story, I would love to do a bit of a dictionary moment, if you would, about what exactly is bold leadership.
Yeah, well, gosh, that's a good question. And by the way, I think your listeners know that, but I don't have the questions beforehand, gang. So when I say that, I'm being genuine. Let's start with leadership, perhaps, because in my experience, there are a lot of people that can mix up leadership with manager, for example. And the way that I would define manager, let's say, would be someone that kind of checks boxes, does what she might be told to do as part of her role. Whereas a leader, my very favorite definition, and to your point, Maria, there are so many definitions of leader. There really are. But my favorite one is from one of the founders of my coaching school. And he says that a leader is someone that declares possible what other people do not. And that's precisely what makes them a leader. So if I put that in my language, it's someone with a vision and holds true to that vision, even if that person might get called crazy or dreamer, or whatever that might be. But not only having the vision, but also the behavior to act toward it. And a bold leader, is someone that indeed does that, like has the courage to move toward it, even with people that are saying this is never going to happen, you're crazy, or literally receiving retribution for that particular leader's thoughts or values, right, that they're living. So it's someone that holds steady to what they know to be true for them and their values, regardless of what's happening.
I love that. That feels like an a person who can be authentic, true to themselves, and stay the course no matter what uh, adversity they might face, and lead
Yeah,
people through it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So when people trust that you are who you say you are, they will follow.
When they trust you are who you say you are and you're congruent, right?
Yes,
Which is
yes,
in one
true.
of there are multiple models of trust and what defines trust, but congruence is one of them. So our actions are matching our words.
Yep, yep. Walking our talk. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, so tell me a little bit about why you're so passionate about this topic of leadership development. It feels like there's a juicy story in there.
Yeah, there's a juicy story, and you're right. I'm very passionate. Well, let's say, first of all, the passion and energy comes from what I believe fully that I am living my life's purpose. Like, this is why I'm here. And that's probably part of the energy you're feeling for sure. But I also had a coach, and he said, one of the teachers at my coaching school, and he said, there's several things that can determine the quality of a coach. Okay, the first one is, of course, having had formal instruction as a coach at a good school, certification, etc. Okay, check. There's another one that talks about our genuine interest in life, in people, in cultures, music, drama. Before this conversation, for example, we were talking about the trains, the high-speed trains in France or in China. As an example, that's an interest in some other way of being, right, or living. And the third one is, he said, we coach from our wounds.
Mm.
So very often, and we can look around the world. In fact, I was watching The Secret the other night, and Jack Canfield said this. I love it that he put it out there so plainly because it's true. And he said so very often, in his words, that he was hearing people saying, well, I can't because I had this trauma in childhood or that trauma in childhood or this problem going on or that challenge. And he said, look, 95% of people on this earth, at least, have had some kind of trauma. And so it just doesn't work as an excuse. Yes, we can be gentle with ourselves, but easy does it, but do it. So back to this third one about we coach from our wounds. And that really has stuck with me. And because I've indeed am one of the 95% that has been through trauma. And from a really young age, I just became interested in as I used to call it, self-improvement. To this day, where when anybody walks in my home, they'll see my bookshelves just full of all kinds of that stuff in varying degrees, whether it's from yoga teacher training I did, various spiritual programs I've been part of, coaching trainings I've done. And so what I started noticing is the more that I focused on my inner world and improving it, the better indeed the rest of my life was getting. And as I would talk to more people about this in a personal context in my own life, I started noticing people would share, wow, you're helping me, or that was really helpful, insightful. And yeah, and the first time I heard about coaching, my whole body lit up. Like it was like lightning going through it. And so I knew that that was a path for me. That's one of the ways that I've navigated my life is when I feel that. I mean, they say the body is much wiser than the rational brain, right? The body picks it up, and then the brain, of course, makes sense of it. I mean, we need our brains. But so that was an early indicator. And it's one of the professions. There's a few things about it which I love. It is about truly the more healed, the more evolved we become as humans, the better we become as coaches or as leadership advisors. Because really, if we go back to the definition I mentioned earlier, that it is about declaring something possible other people do not. Well, we can't declare possible what we can't see, right? And so to be able to see it, let's say we can see even bigger and better things, the more evolved we become. That's probably a better way to say it.
Mm.
If I think about my own life, right? When I'm playing small, I can only see this far. But the more that I'm myself, here we go, making a bolder move, which felt scary, but do it anyway kind of thing, then it's like the eyesight clears and I can see more. And so it is with the personal development, how that helps us become better coaches and adds to my joy, by the way, which just creates a virtuous circle. And so I hope I'm answering your question. I'm I'm trusting I
You
am.
are.
But that's how I got into it. I heard about it, my body lit up, and I
Yeah.
followed the path. Yeah, and it all
Yeah.
made sense, right? It all made sense by the points of what my coaching teacher pointed out to be important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it for all the same reasons. It seems to me, when I think back, I think I've always been a coach. Um, I've always had that, I don't know, a sense about when other people came to me with questions or wanting to brainstorm ideas, or that I loved the opportunity to help them see things in a different way from a new perspective. And I think that's a lot of
Exactly.
it too. Yeah, just opening up the aperture a little bit. So, how does the fact that you've been through a lot of self-discovery work, most of us coaches have gone that path as well. How does that translate into your work and to your coaching school?
How does that translate into my work?
Yeah.
And in the, yeah,
Oh,
well, I think it's what you just said, right? I know the serenity and the very deep fulfillment that comes with having breakthroughs, right? Breaking through our own stinking thinking. I know I'm not the only one to use that term, but breaking through the limits that we put on ourselves,
mhm.
the serenity and the freedom that comes with that, right? And genuinely wanting to help my fellow humans experience that same freedom and joy, right? It's something that's often said in some of the healing circles I've been in, that giving service is a very selfish thing because we get a lot more out of it than we give. That's what I.
That is so,
So
so true.
yeah, and so that's really it. And of course, there's a larger thing, as I mentioned, the virtuous circle is the world gets better, right? Even when one person starts feeling more peaceful, there's a virtuous circle around that person. So the world
Right,
gets better. So if we
right.
just multiply that by each person, it's amazing what can be done.
Yeah. I love to say that when we are well, right, when we take care of ourselves and are at our best, everyone around us benefits from that, right? So, and now they care. It's like a ripple effect, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask one more personal question, and then we're going to get back into the leadership stuff
Feel
deeply.
free. Whatever you
Um,
want to ask.
I want you to tell us how you got from Kentucky to France.
This is the time I get to pull out my accent and say y'all, right? I get that a lot in France. Actually, they say Kentucky Fried Chicken. I said, that's right. Colonel Sanders all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Well, I go back to the fact that I do a lot with intuition. I've just, the main times in my life when I have not felt good were when I was somehow cutting myself off from it. So the opposite, obviously, is I've learned to follow it for my highest joy. And I just, even though I grew up single mother household, for the most part, lower income. I just had a dream. I just felt pulled to come to France. And I had continued French throughout college, even though in Kentucky, one could say, what in the world are you going to do with French? But I loved it as a language. And in French club, there was some alumni that came back and said, never stop taking French. And then I ended up majoring in both French and business management. And then lo and behold, there's an opportunity in Paris for a semester that would combine both. So studying French, obviously, but then also doing a business internship. So one of the things my mom would always say is, you got to follow your dream. We had this family friend that has always loved ballet, and she took off to New York City, which from Kentucky felt like a really big deal, right? So she took off to New York, and she's still been with the ballet company there ever since. And it's a similar thing that my mom always said to do for France. And so I did. And I had never lived in an international city, much less took off outside the US before. And there I was. And I have to say, it was really hard. Culture shock is a real thing. And just about the time I started getting into the groove of it, it was time to go back to Kentucky. So then I had another culture shock, a reverse culture shock to deal with. But essentially, the seed was planted. I met other Americans like me that really are interested in experiencing a whole nother culture. That I started also working in two different companies that were very international. So I got a taste for what that was like. And from then on, it's basically I had the fever. I knew that I was growing at a different rate just by the nature of the conversation topics are very different than at least I had been growing before in my previous experiences in the States. So that was part of the push. And then, yeah. So that's what got me there. And then what kept me there was a boyfriend. You can say more about it if you want, but we can switch to another topic. But yeah, it was an ongoing until I really secured employment and was able to stay longer term.
So what I love about that story is that you're living your dream, and you pursued it with and kept at it, right? You never gave up on it, even though you had to go back to Kentucky and figure out another way to get there. I wanted people to hear how when we have a dream and we pursue it with commitment and never give up attitude, and take little steps to figure out how to make it happen, then it can happen for you. You can be living in your France, whatever your dream is, right?
That's actually science, if I may. Which, and I mean, it's science that we set an intention, right? Which is a bit different than goal, as you probably know, right? Because intention also brings in our heart, and it's also part of the process, not just a destination. And so science is intention plus attention. So the attention we give to what our heart most wants equals reality. So we just give regular attention to that intention. I have a success chart here, actually, that my teacher taught me. And it talks about focused will, sincere effort, skillful execution, right? Just what you're saying. There's that saying about the woodcutter that chopped at the tree 99 times, and it was only at the 100th time that the tree fell. So was it only that one time that made it fall, or all the other 99 times?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It's the accumulation of consistent effort.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about bold leaders. Let's talk about what are the maybe most significant needs of the leaders you work with?
Oh, great question. The most significant needs are for these leaders to be fully themselves and to feel completely psychologically safe that they can be themselves. And two things: one, still completely belong at work. In other words, be wanted, be part of the team. And the second thing is create impact while fully being themselves. Taking that a step further, which is very similar, basically, we humans are missing meaning. And a lot of us struggle with, and I put myself in there, right? Can I achieve meaning, which is fulfilling, right? That's the whole point of it. And meaning can come in the form of belonging. Most of us feel that sense of belonging, a sense of connection with ourselves and with other humans. And very often they'll question, can I have that and create the tangible, financial, or harder results that I'm paid to, I promise to, or quite frankly, that I have to because, I need to pay my own bills, for example. And so that's typically the question that comes in. And what's interesting, and I did not do this research myself, so I will say that as a caveat, but something that I've heard from several people is that the Center from Disease Control in the States, one of their new leading drivers of disease is loneliness, especially since COVID. Mm-hmm. And while certainly I raised my hand, I would totally agree that there are a lot of advantages to virtual or hybrid working. The disadvantage can be that many, many people feel isolated, right? And so that, again, that sense of meaning, connection, but really giving ourselves permission to do it, and bosses, I use that term, giving their teams permission to also do it, realizing that it's actually a win-win. I would say a win-win-win, that the individual leaders feel so much better, more fulfilled. They're more creative, more creative problem solving. They're more collaborative. The team or organization then benefits because they're producing better results. And then before you know it, guess what? There's that virtuous circle again. So the world is feeling better. Not, of course, not the whole world, but the world outside the organization at least.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that's the biggest topic right now.
So meaning and belonging, those are the two key words I took away from that. And I hear that all the time with my clients as well, that they are looking to find meaningful work and feel seen and heard, and that they are contributing. So yes. I'm hearing that too. Bigger. So that's playing out, I think, all over. And I love what you just said about how this impacts the organization and the world meaning the world around each one of us, right? That we have influence over, right?
Exactly. Like when I'm happier, my children benefit, for example.
Exactly.
And then they affect their friends, and it goes on and on.
It goes on and on. Yeah. Yeah. So when we can achieve those things within the work we do, meaning and belonging, and having an impact, it's huge, and it seems so simple, but it's not always easy.
Well put.
To get everyone on board with that, right? Mm-hmm. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, spot on, first of all, about the simple but not always easy. My experience is that until a leader, and I'll focus on the feminine leaders since that's what we're talking about today, until a leader does work on herself, she does not fully embody, can't experience in her body how these softer skills, Okay. And I say that with quotes because I very often hear soft skills over here. We don't have time for them. It's crisis, it's recession. We have to focus on the numbers, the results. So as though they're two separate items when really you put them together and they're pretty darn powerful combination. So back to this. Until a leader takes the bolder action to start looking at herself, right? Because we always say start with leading self. Start with making sure that whatever it is I want to see in my team, that I am doing myself, right? So until I've experienced it, it's hard for me to grasp, right? Or hard for any leader to grasp. It's can't put into words the benefits,
That
right,
is,
of doing
yeah,
that kind of work.
yeah.
And so it's can be easy. What I notice is to detach from that and just stay only in rational mind, right? Not be in one's heart at work, if you will. And therefore, to treat the soft stuff as an investment we don't have time for. So that's the danger. But as soon as somebody becomes open to that level of self awareness, all bets are off, right?
I'm so glad that you just brought into the conversation the soft skills, what I call human skills. Um, there are so many of these, and I actually just did some research on my own, and and wrote an article about how how in leadership today, how soft skills are treated and trained, right, versus the technical skills, and the emphasis is on all of the technical skills. And there's very little training going on, even though 100 years ago there was a study by Harvard and Stanford and another organization that I can't remember right now after the research I did. Um, they said 100 years ago that soft skills are what will make a leader most successful. So, what are those soft skills? There's so many of them, but there are
Yeah.
things like collaboration. That's a soft skill. It's not taught in a lot of leadership training today. What about critical thinking? What are some of the others that you run into?
Um, Trust building and maintaining,
Trust building, yep.
communicating, especially the more challenging conversations. So,
Yep,
setting boundaries is an
yep.
enormous
Active listening,
challenge for many people. Active listening,
yep.
empathy,
Empathy, absolutely. Yeah, compassion. Yeah,
being present, which goes with the listening, but there's
yeah.
a whole, some people are focused on what seems to me to be a check the box kind of thing when it comes to presence. But internally with themselves, they're not really present. So that can come across in our own energy, right? So there's a whole thing about connecting with ourselves, mindfulness. That's a good
Mindfulness,
one. That
right,
goes with
right,
it, right? Being
right.
able to
Yep,
connect with ourselves and
yep,
understand where we are.
yep. And mindset work, which is different, right? So, yeah, so just think about all of those things we just mentioned. If more leaders were trained to embrace and build those skills, how much better their leadership style would be. They would be more creative. They would bring people together, right? Relationship builders, trust builders, collaborators, right? That just makes so much sense to me.
Well, yeah. And if I may move the envelope a little bit, or,
Okay.
just because it's coming up for me intuitively, but there's also for me a distinction between those who might learn it in a training, right? Because again, that can be a left brain thing where we let me show them empathetic, right? I'll look at you in the eye, I'll soften my gaze, I'll repeat back, oh, that must feel right. People can learn these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if they themselves haven't taken the time to go into their heart with it,
Yeah.
it's not quite the same effect.
Yeah.
And that's
So
that
true.
whole authenticity thing.
That's right.
And so
They got to feel it.
you have to feel it. People
They
can
got to
tell
feel it.
that, right? We
Yeah.
can feel
Oh,
the
yeah.
energy. We can feel
Yeah.
the intention. There it is again, that word.
Yeah.
And so, similar to what you were saying, for me, I mean, it's a leadership tenet that I have seen to be true. And it's something I bring to my clients just because I believe it, is relationship precedes results. And if we go into the Patrick Lencioni model, right, where he talks about the 5 elements of a dysfunctional team, of course, we don't want dysfunction. So if we think about function, the short of it is there are 4 elements that are all about relationship
Yeah.
before we get to results. But what do most companies do, like we mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
They think, well, we don't have the time, money, or energy to invest in the humans. Over here, let's go for results. And then usually they circle back and they are spending even more time, even more money, even more energy trying to
Right.
repair
Right.
the
The
relationships,
relationships.
knock
Yeah.
down the silos, stop the passive aggressive behavior, all that stuff. So, in short, we would have just like beautiful places to work, people that are open hearted, real conversations, not necessarily always singing kumbaya. That's not real either,
Mm-mm.
right?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
But at least know that we're all coming from good intention. We can have the real conversation and move on to shared ownership, move on to creating something really awesome.
Right.
So I've actually been part of an organization like that. It was quite magical. And say, yeah, if only that were possible in larger parts of the world, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too if, and I know this is true, happened to me when I was in my 30-year corporate career plenty of times. I'm kind of that kind of person, right? Heart centered, empathetic. It just comes to me naturally. I'm pretty calm. I'm pretty intuitive, like you, um, and came from that place as a leader and was often told that I'm too soft, that, no one will follow me. Prove them wrong, but that's what women get, a lot of that
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
feedback, negative feedback about being truly themselves, authentic leaders who are all of the things we just described that would be better if we were.
Mhm. Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, there's a double standard that is loud and clear, exists, still exists.
Yeah.
But here's what I can share. I've been asked recently in 2 different magazine articles, like, what do I see as one of the biggest mistakes that women leaders make? And the biggest one that I've seen is trying to be like the guys. So, more precisely, I have coached women leaders, vice presidents, that literally had been trying to squelch their own level of intuition and only act from their rational brain because they wanted to fit in with the other, with the gentlemen they were working with. And one of them actually ended up telling me that she realized what a mistake it was because she herself an engineer, she herself MBA, like very well educated, VP of this plastics company. And she had a choice to hire, she had candidate A, B, and C, right, for an open job. Well, let's say C was not part of it. Easy to eliminate that person for whatever reason. Candidate A looked great on paper, really good. Like she knew he would please the guys. Candidate B, not quite as prestigious on paper, but to her, she felt this person, like it felt like the right choice. So she went with candidate A. And within a few weeks, that person showed himself to not be the right choice, right? So she was able to show herself that. And I've worked with another VP in tech, who, by the way, ended up moving up to SVP in the time we worked together. And same thing. Her first question was, how do I become more impactful in the boardroom, acting like the guys? And I said, well, first, stop trying to act like the guys. Let's be like you. And the more that she got clear, well, who is that? Who am I? And what is important to me? And what are my values? And the more she got clear on what her values are, the more she started to see that this work situation, by the way, was not in alignment with what was important to her. So within the last year, she's quit and she's started her own company. And she's thrilled. She's thrilled. She's living her purpose, the dream that you talked about, Maria.
Yeah.
So definitely not easy. I'm not saying that's where that bolder leadership comes in, right? It's like, what do I stand for and why? And not everybody is ready for the truth with a capital T, right? Meaning us being who we are,
right,
and getting the results like you said you were able to get. I love to use the example of Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Like, what a gorgeous example of a leader with empathy. During COVID, fewer than 5 deaths in the whole country. I think it was 2. I could be mistaken, but definitely fewer than 5. Amazing. So it's proof that the softer, here we go again, or human skills can absolutely make it doesn't mean we can't make decisions. That's it. I think that's a myth, is thinking that when we are really strong in the more human skills, that somehow it means we're not impactful decision makers.
Yeah.
It's a big myth.
And by the way, the skills we're talking about have no gender, even though they're called soft skills. And very often when they are called soft skills, which is why I've stopped doing that, they're attached or aligned with women more than men. But they are truly human skills, and we all have the capacity to own them, to use them, to lead with them. And I think when we do, good things happen for everybody. Okay, so we could probably talk about this part of the conversation for a long time, because we are both passionate about
it's where it's the pivot point for the world, right? The more we step into our own humanness, our own vulnerability, we become more comfortable with that, then we can start connecting with other people at a deeper level, and that's where this world has a chance to shift.
Yeah.
And yes, it's about a social movement, but again, it also serves the organization.
Yeah. And it starts one leader at a time, showing the way, right?
Absolutely.
Walking the talk, deciding that no matter what, this is who I am, this is how I lead. And for those who want to use me as a role model, please do, right? and that's the way the ripple starts.
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any hot topics in this human development space today that you've seen in your business?
Hot topics in terms of what most people want to talk about, and
or in development circles, right? What are the things that are being bandied about as the way to do human development today?
Oh, well, I know I was recently again asked the difference between transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and servant based leadership, right? And so I definitely have a bias there, right, of which one I think is most impactful. And it is between the transformational and the servant based, in my definition at least. But for sure, when our heart is in it and we're there to truly be of service, we're going to have a completely different effect than if we are merely, again, I use that expression, but ticking boxes or mimicking something that we've been taught we should be saying, right? It's very different than when we're, to use the iceberg metaphor, lowering the waterline and just being real with the person in front of us, right? So, being of service is a big one. And I would say, in terms of topics, which I did hear you didn't say was necessarily what you meant, but what came to me when you were saying that, I've been asked quite a bit recently to either develop workshops, whole leadership development programs around, or professional speaking around empowerment, and starting with self advocacy, and then how to empower a team or empower the system. And there's a lot in there, if you can imagine. Meaning, it could be a national culture. Someone from Ireland, for example, and by the way, I have Irish roots, so my ears were perking up at this. About, in Ireland, we don't toot our own horn. Like, that's just not what you do. And so it's an interesting, and it could be a national culture, it could be a family culture, right? It could just be something we've learned, whether it's around self-advocacy, whether it's around boosting someone else, having visibility. I've gone through that myself lately. I have more and more visibility. And, there's a part of me that wants to get small, and that is coming from part of my own background. And I know that. But these are some big topics today, because more and more people are seeing, well, that basically they're the CEO of themselves, right? We're all the CEO of ourselves. Whether we're we are entrepreneurs, whether we're employees, it doesn't matter. Like, we need to be building our own networks. We need to be building our own relationships, starting with the one with ourself, of course. And then along with that, the other hot topic is resilience. A lot around resilience, because that engenders, by the way, self-advocacy around setting boundaries so that I can take care of myself. Saying no so I can say yes to me, right? There's a lot around resilience, around not just spending all of my time either with the family or work, but truly having time to myself. And am I worthy of that? Now, there's a question. Worthiness, that's a topic that can come up a lot. So those are overall, let's say, that servant-based leadership, right? Truly wanting to give to the world in a positive way. And then through that, the topics of empowerment and resilience. And at the root of it really is all of us just truly knowing that we deserve it, right? And that when we're giving to ourselves, not in a me way, right? Not in a selfish way, but in a we for the good, that it can only be good stuff. Just like my children know that when I do yoga, right? Mama's going to be a lot nicer after that one. So they're happy to see me go on.
So go do it, Mom. Go do it.
Exactly.
Mom, you need a little yoga now? Yeah. That, all of those things are hot topics for sure. I talk about resilience all the time with my clients as well. And it's not this idea of, facing adversity, right, all the time, right? And what a lot of people call bouncing back, right? I like to say bouncing forward. I don't want to bounce back. But yeah, it's more than that, isn't it? It's that sense of, if we start by knowing who we are we now, and what matters most to us, what do we value, and what do we want? If we can answer those questions in that self-discovery mode, then we can become, we can show up the way we want to be treated, right? We can teach people how to treat us. And when we get that kind of respect, this is, you call it, what did you call it? Virtuous circle. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many of those in this conversation, right? There are so many of those. There's so many, yeah, coming full circle. Yeah. So how can someone listening to this conversation of ours take even one step closer to having maybe more meaning in their work or their lives? What would you advise them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would advise them to just get clear in any given moment about what brings them joy. Just to understand whether they're noticing their body getting lighter, whether they understand they get excited, right, or enthusiastic about something, but just start noticing more about what amps up your energy. Because when we do that, we start cluing in a bit more on what that path is, the one I alluded to earlier in the sense of my body lighting up and knowing that coaching is definitely the place for me. There are other things that do that for me, right? Like the beach, for example, and swimming. Could go down the list, but it's not about me. The encouragement is for you to light up, to start understanding what lights you up. Because when we then can get behind all of these elements that we know make us up, make us happy, then it becomes a lot easier to determine what is my why? Like, what is that? Right. And when we go in with a sense of curiosity in the different situations where perhaps we're not getting that amped up energy, and we can determine for ourselves, okay, what's happening here that's not working, right? So that's actually two things, but the main thing is to have a greater awareness about what's going on for us in every experience and why, and particularly grabbing onto those that bring joy, because that's great information about what we want to create more of going forward.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so often we just don't take the time. We don't
Or
stop.
we don't think we're worth it.
We don't. Yeah, we are worth it. We deserve to be happy, every single one of us, and we deserve to share our gifts with the world, right? So figuring out who we are and what those are, so that we can share them, because when we give, right? It's not about, it's not about, when we give, we said this earlier, right? When we give, we get so much back.
Yeah.
And that's the that's the joy of it.
That's a joy. And I'll say, like, the world deserves for all of us to step into our gifts. The world
Mm,
deserves it. I mean,
mm,
this is just my view of it, but it's like if the betterment of the world were a prism, or like a diamond shape, right? We all have our own special gifts, and we all come at it from all different angles, right? Our own special angle. And so, if one or more of us is not stepping up to the plate for ourselves, it's affecting the betterment of the world,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that's where it's not selfish at all. It's giving.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I've loved this conversation, Colleen. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you,
much for
Maria. It's been
joining us.
fun. Thank you for
It's
having me.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I know that so many golden nuggets here. Is there anything you would like to leave us with, just to wrap this up in a bow?
Yeah, I am really drawn to the phrase, which I have not memorized, so forgive me, but it is a Marianne Williamson. Also, Nelson Mandela said it about, it's not our darkness we're afraid of, it's our light,
Mm,
right? And that we all are light. And that's where the bolder leadership comes in. It's our gift to the world by stepping even more into that and that it's just what Maria and I've just been saying, you and everyone else deserve it. So the more we can let go of the stinking thinking,
Yeah.
and choose to go where it's warm, both with the people, the podcasts that are inspirational, that are warm, the more we'll start shifting that thinking, and through that, be able to step into more behavior that's more loving for ourselves and for others. And then, by the way, hello, we become these much more inspirational and impactful leaders.
Yeah, that's so true. Love that. Thank you so much.
You're so
Colleen,
welcome. Thank you.
you've been a
Honored.
delight. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've loved it, and I know that there are going to be some people who are going to want to reach out to you. So share with us the
I
one
hope
best way for
so.
that to happen.
Yeah. Well, listen, I am at bouldermoves.com, and it is not Boulder like the city. I get that sometimes, or like the rock. It is being bold, being brave. So BOLDERMOVES is my website. I am Colleen at bouldermoves.com if you want to drop me an email. That's 2 L's and 2 E's. You will notice in the first fold of that there's a special gift you can sign up for free if you choose to go to the website. Or you can email me, or I'm also on LinkedIn.
Or
So
you can
all of
drop
it.
in, or you can drop into the show notes because we've got it there for you too.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, good. So do that as well. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm always
indeed.
happy to connect.
Thank you, Colleen. I love that. I love that you are with us today. I love your perspective on bold leadership and all of this conversation today. It's been great. Thank you for joining us.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And for those of you watching and listening, I appreciate that you're a part of this community. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, click a star, let us know what you think. Creating and sharing resources for women is just one of my favorite things to do. And the another favorite thing is being a coach and life for career and life coach for women, navigating challenging times and helping them get unstuck from where they might be stuck, explore new possibilities, and find harmony in their careers and lives. So, if something resonates with you from this episode and you'd like a fresh perspective, just reach out. Let's talk. The links for Colleen and I, as I said, are in the show notes below. So let's meet next week, next Thursday, again, same time, same place, 10 a.m. Pacific time, for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.